Aaron DeVos here, DeVos Tree Care. I just want to give another little reflection on what's happened with this storm that hit Simcoe County. It's been about a week and a half, maybe a little bit closer to 2 weeks since the storm hit, putting, as I understand, about 500,000 people without power. Um, Much of that has been restored. I won't go into the details of where the cleanup is at right now, other than to say that it's going to be a long time before it's all cleaned up. Some people say it's going to take weeks, some say months, some say it'll take years. I more lean towards it's going to take years to clean this all up. Um, a little bit of what we've been doing in all this. We've been doing some work for private homeowners as well as for a municipality. It's been quite interesting. One day we were working for the municipality. We did a lot of chipping, a lot and a lot of chipping, and then we came back to the same area about 2 days later, and there was the same amount of brush back because what the city had said is now that whatever's in people's backyards they can drag out to the front, and that will get chipped as well. So it just feels like never-ending piles. We had one day where I tried to calculate as precise as possible. Two trucks going. One truck did 3.5 dump loads. Another truck did 4.5 dump loads, which works out to about 94 yards of wood chips. That's typically what we would take out in about a month. So to do that in a single day, 94 yards of wood chips is crazy, and that only covered a couple city blocks. So yeah, it's been absolutely nuts. I do think it'll take a couple years in part because there's still stuff hanging from trees in people's backyards, and that'll probably, some of that will just get ignored and they'll stay hanging. But tops are broken off, and that'll be broken off for quite some time. And there's just such a vast area of damage. So I won't give too much more reflection about that. Um, Talk about a little, should I say, tangent or something that I've kind of been trying to drive home to residents in the area and even tree guys a little bit is the importance of organizing this right, especially how branches are stacked. I know this sounds stupid to some people. Why does it matter how branches are stacked? But I think we could cut off half the time it takes for cleanup if residents had to properly stack their branches. I would go so far as to say that perhaps, and this might be a little controversial, that homeowners should have their branches skipped over if they don't stack them properly. And a proper stack, if you don't know, is where the butt of each branch, as the pile gets added to, just keeps overlapping a little bit. And what that communicates to whoever's chipping is whatever is at the front of the pile gets grabbed first, so you don't get an intermingled web of mess. Now, I had a friend who kind of mocked me. He was talking about all this, and then meanwhile, as he's talking in a video he made for me, a grapple came behind and just grabbed the whole bunch, threw in the back of a truck. So what the most efficient way to do cleanup is, I mean, that's a discussion that's going to be had for quite some time. I do wonder if a grapple is most efficient, but then there's also the costs involved, and there's quite the calculation to figure out what exactly is the right route to go. I can certainly tell you that a 6-inch chipper is probably not the right way to go. I know one of the places we worked at, the township had contracted in a couple of guys that had 6-inch chippers, and that's great, but it's not going to put much of a dent in terms of what's going on. I want to make a few more reflections about a couple different things. One is about insurance. I find it quite fascinating. I've written an article on this in the past and how insurance works with trees, and I've had a lot of conversations during all this with homeowners, and not everyone understands how it all works. How if a branch falls from the neighbor's tree and lands on one person's property, that it actually ends up being that person whose insurance covers it and not the neighbor. If there ever were a situation where we use the actual terminology of it being an act of God, how the branches broke and the trees failed, this would be that time. The reason why I say that is because it didn't matter how well someone pruned a tree, or even if they cabled the tree probably would have failed. That's just how crazy of a storm event it was. If, let's say, a birch tree was cobra cabled together between 3 stems, my bet, and I haven't seen any, I don't have any video evidence of it, but maybe someone else does. is that the tops would have broken off right above the cobra cables. So even if the tree was cabled together, the tree probably would have failed. Um, and also, if the tree was pruned and dead branches were taken out and cross were taken out and whatever else you guys want to do, crown reduction was done, I imagine that there still would be a lot of failures. Um, in fact, it's not the dead branches that feel like that were the concern in this case. I think it was the live branches, particularly on something like a silver maple, where you got the winter bud that's all these clusters, you know, those bright red clusters you see before it blossoms. So those clusters have quite a bit of surface area, and that's one of my theories behind why there's so much damage with silver maples, is because they had additional surface area that they may not always have on the branch tips, in in addition to the fact that a lot of sap was running at this time of year. So yeah, all this to say is that it didn't matter how well someone took care of the tree. The tree very well could have failed irregardless. So how insurance will deal with that will be quite interesting, particularly as it relates to whether or not homeowners' rates will go up after the fact. So I'm hoping that insurance will step up and cover people where they need to be covered. But the problem is that if everyone gets covered for everything, insurance rates, not just for Simcoe County, but I imagine all across the country, they will go up. I've guesstimated, could be off by a lot. It's going to be over $1 billion in property damage just on homeowners' properties. It could be a lot higher than that. It could be 2 billion. It could be half that. It could be half a billion. Doesn't matter. The idea is that it was a lot and a lot of damage, and so insurance rates will go up as a result of that. But it'll be really interesting to know by how much, especially since, as I mentioned, it wasn't really the homeowner's fault in almost any situation. It truly was a bit of an act of God in that sense. Um, so I found that quite interesting. Yeah, I've had homeowners say to me stuff like, it was the neighbor's tree. Why am I paying the deductible and having my insurance rate go up as a result? And that is a fair question and concern on the part of a homeowner, that the neighbor's tree had a branch break off, hit their house, and then they have to pay the deductible and their insurance rate goes up. I'm not saying the neighbor necessarily should have to pay for it, but it just feels wrong and unfortunate and sad in light of all that. So yeah, those are a few thoughts about the insurance industry. Another conversation I think I'm kind of been trying to have for some time, even before this storm, and it's become a little bit more to light during the storm, is the relationship between municipalities and private tree owners. So as I mentioned already, there was a company that had a very small chipper. They came in with a trailer and they were chipping on the behalf of the municipality. Guys weren't wearing chainsaw pants. And you just kind of wondered, how did the municipality decide that that was the appropriate tree company to work with? How was that company vetted? Did they just happen to have a name that said, we are top-notch tree service or whatever, and then because they operate a tree company, therefore they're qualified to do the work? I don't know, but I wonder if there's a better process through which municipalities can find appropriate contractors to take on work. So let's say there's another crazy storm that happens in 10 years in one region, and one municipality wants to reach out to another municipality and say, hey, we're looking for arborists to help fill certain roles to clean this mess up. Does that neighboring municipality have a list of approved contractors? Now, that neighboring municipality probably has a list of contractors that they already sub work out to, but what about when it goes beyond that scope of work? And that's when I found that the municipalities had no idea who should come in. So as I mentioned, yeah, one company didn't even have chainsaw pants and was not well equipped for it. So I think that flow of information could be a little bit more streamlined. In my ideal dream world, municipalities would keep records of all the tree companies that work in that area, and that is good because it's good for homeowners to say that the municipalities vetted them. but it's also good in situations like this where neighboring municipalities need help from other municipalities and they know who are approved contractors. This is something I've kind of driven on quite a few times, but I don't see much communication between municipalities and private tree contractors, which is too bad because trees depend on their local environment in order to be sustained. So arborists need to be attuned to what's happening in the local environment. Municipalities are best equipped to do that. Being a ISA certified arborist isn't going to help you. You learn general guidelines for tree health, you learn general guidelines for pruning, for how to remove a tree, but you aren't aware of the nuances associated with that particular region, whether that's bylaws, whether that's what kind of trees should be planted, whether that there's a certain disease in the area like oak wilt, hemlock woolly adelgid, spider lanternfly, the list can go on and on. What is that pathway to communicate to arborists and vice versa? What's the pathway that arborists can assist the city with what's going on? I firmly believe that municipalities have a implementation gap, and what I mean by that is they want there to be a certain percentage canopy cover in a city. They can't implement that though in many regards because they don't have jurisdiction over private properties. They can try to have some jurisdiction, but they don't. In my area of Hamilton, there's something like 54 or is it 56% of trees are on private property. So the vast majority of trees are on private property, and the city wants to increase that, but they can't just force a homeowner to have more trees and to take better care of their trees. Us private tree companies, we are the ones that interact with those homeowners. So I think that we can be better equipped as to how to make those interactions. And then, so if municipalities have implementation gap, I think private tree companies have a local knowledge gap as to what is really happening in the area. As I already mentioned, if there's a disease in the area, what is the way that information flows down into the general knowledge of the tree community in that area. I sometimes think that in the tree industry, I think we kind of like it. We operate a little bit like a spider's web, and there's on the periphery of the spider's web, there's all sorts of different organizations, municipalities, there's social media on the outside of that spider's web, and then the arborist can kind of figure out ways to get to different points of knowledge within that spider's web. But the problem is that certain important knowledge will get missed, and it's nice to have that spider's web because there's not this hierarchy of structure whereby arborists have to go through to get a lot of information. But I believe that there should be more of a trickle down effect, more of a funnel whereby information starts at a higher off source, whether that's just laws that rule the country, but then it flows down potentially into municipalities, and information can flow down more into private contractors. Not to say that the tree guys can't access the knowledge without going through a municipality, but I just feel like certain information should try to be trickled down more from the top to the bottom rather than this chaotic sourcing of knowledge. I think certain important knowledge should trickle down more. That's a bit of a rant on my part. That's something that people can critique. I don't pretend to know everything. I have been doing this for a little while, but I am not in senior levels of government. I'm not senior with any particular organization. I just talk to homeowners. I talk to arborists. I think and reflect on this sort of stuff. And I am totally open to critiques. If anyone has them, I would love that actually. If anyone wants to have a conversation about this stuff, I would love to do that. But yeah, thanks for listening to my ramblings, and I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye.